All right, we are back with another episode of The Bottom Line, and today we're joined by Jason Sommerville. So he has 20 years of experience in capital markets, M&A, strategic planning. He's actually executed over 50 billion of Fortune 500 capital market transactions. Just a wealth of knowledge that he's talking about the kind of climate of the market right now on the M&A side, how GW Partners, his firm, his M&A firm, works with founders to maximize the value of their businesses, enterprise value. Vast majority of his clients, they work on a potential sale, or at least that is in the cards for the founders that he come alongside with his firm at GW. But we just get into all across the board. We work on a couple clients with GW Partners, and that's how we first got introduced to him. And they've just been phenomenal to work alongside with. So we talk about some of our current clients, but also just the market landscape, what he looks at in terms of what makes an attractive partner for him or for a client of theirs. What are red flags when he's looking at the P&L or looking at the founder for specifically. So this would be a really, really insightful episode for our listeners in terms of especially you founders out there that are looking to get acquired either relatively soon or in the future in terms of a one-day goal. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode because it's a long one, but jam-packed with a ton of nuggets. And I'm excited for you guys to listen to this. So how does GW Partners work with brands?
Yeah, well, that answer is actually kind of in a few ways. I mean, it is sort of at the core of what we do is we help mostly founder-owned companies think through and develop a strategic plan for, we'll call it the evolution of their enterprise, is how I would put it. And so even though that sounds sort of vague and kind of 30,000 foot, I mean, we really do sort of get involved with brands at all levels within all functions of their business, but with that core sort of North Star always being, we're here to help you grow enterprise value. So there's a lot of ways you can grow enterprise value. It's not just by growing revenue, right? That's one way, but that's one of many factors to building a company that over time just becomes a bigger, better, more valuable business. So our role is really sitting with the founder kind of as part of that strategic team to help drive the business towards bigger and better things.
So do you guys call yourself an M&A advisory firm? Is that like what you would say, hey, we are, GW Partners is?
That's part of it, right? So I'd say the way I always describe our model is if you took, a business consulting firm and an investment bank and you jammed them together, that's kind of us, right? Because we do everything that both of those types of firms do individually, but neither of those types of firms do all together. So, on the front end, we're very operational, very strategic in terms of how we consult and help a business, make decisions. And then when it comes to raising capital, or if there's a strategic transaction that they're trying to do, or even let's say an exit from the founder, we also, provide all of those services. So we're kind of full suite across that business consulting and investment banking world.
Brands aren't coming to you necessarily every single time to have an exit.
That's right. I would say that more often than not, an exit is somewhere within the founder's, I'd say, plans. Sometimes those are very kind of imminent type plans, like, hey, I know I want to do this within a year or within 6 months. And other founders are more like, look, I know my ultimate goal is to eventually exit this business, but I'm not sure exactly when. And then we sort of work through with them, okay, well, let's sort of work backwards from what would that exit need to look like for it to be interesting to you? And then we can determine how can we get there? How long might it take to get there? What's the right plan to get there? So what we've always told clients is it's not a bad thing to plan for, because even if you don't do it, usually all the things you did along the way are really good.
So one way or another, though, they have the intentions of selling, whether it's imminent or long-term. You're helping them plan for that exit.
Most, I would say most. I wouldn't say 100%, but I'd say probably 70 to 80% of our clients.
So this kind of pairs with my next question is like how you guys are different, or basically have you answered that and how you are different than other, I would guess, quote unquote competitors in your category? or other firms out there?
Yeah, well, I would say there's really no firm like us in the market. Like there's no firm that
Let's go.
combines all of those, I'd say, services into one and can actually do it, right? So, we, and not to give you the full bio, but we have a really healthy background of experience in both operating and in, really high level investment banking and, strategic finance and capital markets. So that's a fairly rare combination of skills and experience. And also, by the way, like even at that lower middle market level, most of the brands we work with are going to be revenue between, say, 7-8 million and 80 million, like in that neighborhood. Sometimes we go above 100. Rarely do we go much kind of below that in the single digits. And so, that's a world where if you haven't run a business like that, a lot of times it's very hard for you to put yourself in that founder's seat and fully understand not only what they're going through, but what those risks are that they're going to face. Oftentimes, they don't even know them yet because they haven't got to that place in the movie. They're only 30 minutes in. You've already seen it. You know what's coming, 30 minutes later, and you help them get ready for it.
I'm actually really interested and excited to ask this question and what your perspective is on it, Jason. Like when you're vetting a brand, if it's like someone that you're about to potentially work with and come alongside, like what gets you excited when you go under the hood and look to see, what you anticipate happening with this brand as you come alongside? I'm curious to hear both sides. Like, what are common red flags that you want to stay away from when working with a brand? Like, for example, when you look at their P&L, like really high OpEx or really low LTV or really high CAC, like what are some of those red flags? But also, what are some of those indicators that are like, wow, this gets me really excited about this brand. There's a lot of opportunity here. Like kind of both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, the first place we start just in general is actually not quantitative. It's with the founder. It's with the owner. And I think, we're sort of assessing that founder from a number of, I would say, points of view. It's how passionate are you? How I'd say committed are you? How talented are you? How open are you to looking for input? It's funny because a lot of founders, they naturally have that personality of they're a little type A, they're a little alpha, like they're like, hey, I know how to do this, I got this, right? But then what we're looking for are the ones that have all of that, but also kind of recognize that really good input from really smart, experienced people is going to be really valuable, right? So that's always a big one too. So we start with founder, we're assessing personality, fit, all that. And then from the business standpoint, I think, Taylor, fundamentally, we're starting just with the financial health of the business. And I think, because you've done some work with us, I think you understand we're going down to the bone marrow with that assessment, right? Well beyond just what like a really high level view of, looks like you have some decent gross margins here. Looks like you have some decent operating margins. No, like where are we in the trends? What are unit economics? How are we going to scale? Can we maintain our margins as we scale? All of those things because we're always looking at it through the lens of the scenario we're going for here is growth and development. So what are the things that are going to keep this company from growing and growing, I'd say, sustainably and profitably? I mean, I think especially now, I mean, we're never going to be a tail kind of wag the dog kind of a firm, but at the same time, you have to be aware of what's happening in the market. And as you guys know, the world's a little different place in consumer, especially D2C, than it was 2-3 years ago, right? And if founders want to build enterprise value, they have to build profitable businesses. So that's something that, coming in, if any founder would talk to me right now, I mean, one of the first things I'm looking for is how do we get to benchmark profitability and how do we stay there even as we scale? So if I see a business that I believe can scale profitably, then I get excited, right? You said that's like, okay, I see the vision, right? Because sometimes it's like, I'm doing good now, but then you can kind of look 2 steps ahead and go, there's a wall there that I know this business is going to hit. And all of a sudden, kind of like it's something that in your world, I know my CAC's going to triple and then we're screwed.
I thought it was interesting that you thought when Taylor asked what got you excited about a brand and what the homework that you did, you started for a person and firm that is so data and numbers oriented, you started with qualitative metrics around the founder, which, for Taylor and I, and especially for me, when doing like all these front end, I guess, before they come onboarded as a client, that's a lot of my job and homework, but it's really assessing that in a 30-minute strategy call. So I'm curious, like from you, like how much of a deep dive into the founder are you doing rather than just kind of high level, like hearing what they say, as much as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them. Like, what does that process look like? How deep do you guys go?
It's pretty deep. I mean, our sort of sales cycle it's usually multiple meetings, quite a bit of upfront diligence, quite a bit of, I'd say, again, when we're talking, a lot of times we're talking about the business, but we're sort of assessing how they speak about the business. We don't necessarily do a ton of like, well, tell me how you grew up and, but we're trying to kind of figure them out, right? Certainly. I mean, it's funny because a lot of people don't know, like being in our line of work and even being just an investment banker, there's a lot of psychology involved. So understanding people is just goes with the territory. And so, we've gotten pretty good of assessing, I think, people pretty quickly, and quickly is relative, right? But I'd say on average, before we're signing a client, we're probably spending anywhere from 7 to 10 hours with them, probably intense discussions.
Not surprising. Well, I just wanted to double click on that point because that's obviously very close to home on my side of the business where I'm doing all the sales and marketing and talking to people before they become a client. So it's getting into that, as much as understanding the numbers would be super, super helpful as well. It is really getting a pulse on, what is this client or potential client saying and what are the things that they talk about?
Yeah. And I think just in a founder-owned business, man, I mean, when you're kind of an early stage company, which most of our clients will be, just that idea of are you going to make it through, right? Because the odds are against you. Like, I mean, let's be honest. Like the statistics are, let's say you're someone who's at 10 million and you're trying to get to 30. Well, a very small percentage of the people who get to 10 get to 30. Like, are you going to be one of those people? And a lot of that comes down to just the skills and approach of the founder. There's definitely some luck involved, for sure, but that's such a huge driver of are you going to make it? I think us too, we're always looking to, okay, because we're trying to be a force multiplier, right? We're trying to be tailwind, but we can't do everything. Like we're trying to like, okay, we're looking to support, right? We're not looking to take over. So, that's a pretty important relationship, that dynamic of we need that the founder's the lead horse, man. We're just there to give them a lot of pushes.
Very similar thought process for how we want to partner with brands.
Man, shout out Nate at Wildbird right there. Everything you said about what an ideal client would be, he definitely embodies that. Just someone that's susceptible to hear your input and take counsel and implement against it. He's a dream client.
There's a problem today with too much fake UGC saturation. Consumers are looking for authentic reviews and content, and this is a way that you can stand out in your crowded market with authentic influencer content. So Cody here with an ad read for Get Cyril. So there's an explosion of D2C brands across categories. You got to be able to stick out. We here at Kinship actually use Cyril for influencer discovery, but Cyril is not just a discovery tool, but a way that you can search for brand aligned influencers, but reach out directly. You can manage them all in place. You can track performance all within one platform. So brands like Avi, Legends, Tab Chocolate are using them to get hundreds of creators talking about them on socials, and you can too. And in addition to that, all of our clients here at Kinship that are doing seeding are using that platform as well. So you can start your free 7-day trial with Cyril to get authentic UGC. Go check them out.
I'm curious, you've spoken a lot about, there's a lot to unpack and things you've gone into already. So appreciate all the value. You've spoken a lot about like enterprise value and you and your team coming alongside brands to help optimize that. I think our listeners filled with D2C brands in this category that we're speaking about, they're all interested to hear, how do we make ourselves as sexy as possible for a potential exit? I think most people dream about that. And so you're obviously someone that sits in that seat daily and that's the role that you're playing. What are some of those what's that formula look like if you could put it into one that helps optimize and maximize enterprise value?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like if we were to kind of put on the board what I would call some of the ideal characteristics, right, of a business that, you know, not only has a healthy enterprise value, but a growing and evolving enterprise value, especially we'll keep it in the world of D2C kind of types of companies for the sake of this discussion. So first of all, I think you got to think about, how do I create a brand, not just a product business? I think that's like a good one that a lot of people start with. That's one that's that's like a lot of people kind of know that, like it's kind of known in the market. Like, hey, I know that if I build a brand, I'm going to have a more valuable business. Now, what a lot of times people don't really know what that means. They just say build a brand and then they just stop there, right? So, you know, if I were to put a brand, if the definition in a very short form would be, you know, you're able to earn the second, third, and fourth conversations with the customer, right? So that's how you know you have the makings of a brand, right? There's many other things that go into it, but I'd say that's one. So you want to spend time building a brand, and if you not really have those characteristics, you want to try to build them, right? You want to have very healthy kind of unit economics in everything that you do. You can have some things that maybe are intentionally a little lower margin than others. Maybe they're not necessarily a loss leader, but they're kind of meant to be introductory type products. But unit economics, you have to pay attention, and you know, because I see businesses all the time that they'll have 70% of what they're doing is doing well, and the other 30% is doing not very well, and they don't even know. And just culling those things consistently is very important. So unit economics, really important. You know, you have to pay attention. And then I'd say also, you know, think about your future strategy of, why do I have a reason to exist? And can I live everywhere from a channel perspective? You should be thinking about, how do I make sure that if I'm developing a product or developing a brand that's kind of in a product category, can I live online, but I can also live in store? Can I live on an e-tailer? Can I live in, you know, an international market as well as a US market? What you want is, you want to build something that can live in a lot of places. And the reason why it can live in a lot of places is because the core of it is just really good, right? You've developed a really good product. You've developed a really good way to message and convince people that it's good. And then once they try it, they absolutely agree. They rate it highly. They tell their friends, so on and so forth. So it's having that idea of, and D2C, this is tough for some founders of, they get very tunnel on, like, they think in D2C focus only. And they think, a lot of times they think channel before they think brand, or they think channel before they think, you know, am I building the best product I can build? And so it's like, no, channel, you want to live on as many channels as you can. And so you have to build from the ground up in that regard. I'd say that's important. Another one I would point out, and then I'll pause, is, how are you building your team, right? A lot of times people, especially in this world, a lot of companies, they're bootstrapped, right? You've got kind of a thin organizational structure. You know, you've got sort of some contractors here, some contractors there, which is great when you're trying to grow a company and not overburden it with costs that you don't necessarily need. It's an efficient way to pay for a service, let's say. But the question then is, you know, what's the right mix of resources? And if I were going to sell this company tomorrow, would they feel that this team I've assembled, is it a world-class team? Is it sort of a JV team? Is it kind of what is it? And like in the case for you guys, good example would be, so Kinship occupies a spot on that board as part of the team, right? So not only would someone say, okay, well, assessing you guys just as your own, ability to fulfill your role, but
world class.
Yeah, exactly. World class. Totally agree. I agree with that. Not just because I'm on your podcast. But really, like, how do you fit in with the bigger picture, right? One of the things that I like about working with you guys is you fit in with the bigger picture better than anybody I've seen that does what you do, right? And that's what I wish, like if I were going to evangelize about how the firms that do what you guys do, how they should work with clients, I would say do it how Kinship does it, because they fit in so seamlessly as part of that broader team. They play their role really well. They know that you're part of a team. You're not just a solo, bounty hunter. And that's how you have to think about it. But think about that with everybody on your team, right? And build a team that, like, if you went to someone and said, here's my team, you'd be really proud of that team. So there's more, but again, I don't want to monologue.
I wanted to double click on something that you were saying earlier around omnichannel, building a brand for omnichannel. Clarification, you're not necessarily advising some of your clients or all clients to be omnichannel at that stage of, well, I guess it obviously ranges whether you're on the 8 million or 80 million on where you guys sit. But because a lot of times we're advising clients to be as more focused on particular channels as possible versus.
Let me double click on the clarification. I think he's not talking about ad channel, but more so like getting on Amazon or getting into retail, like more demand capture channels. Is that what you're saying, Jason? Or were you talking about ad channels?
It applies to both. I was speaking more sales channel, but I think it's a good point. It kind of applies, I think, to both. But specifically, no, Cody, I'm not necessarily saying that all channels are always appropriate for all companies, right? And in any given scenario, there may be a right way to approach expanding the channels that you're currently selling on, right? It's not just, more channels is always better, because there are certain channels it doesn't make sense, right? And I think but it's more of a mindset of basically saying, well, where does my customer want to shop? How do I make sure that I am showing up where my customer wants me to be? And how am I making sure that I'm building a company that can live on multiple channels profitably, right? Because if I'm trying to build a sustainable business that's going to grow and have, a solid foundation, I personally think that's the mindset you have to have. And then, as you go through, you will determine what the right timing is, maybe to enter a new channel. Perfect example here, like you said, would be, do I try to go into retail, brick and mortar? Like, let's say I've got a D2C native business and everybody's telling me, look, I got to be in stores, right? I have to be on shelf. Well, maybe. It depends. Is that where does your customer want you to be on shelf? Are they saying, will you please, I wish you were on shelf? And then, oh, by the way, can I make the economics work on shelf? And so it's really a mindset.
That's the important clarification too. I think that's where there's a lot of noise out there around doing other channels that are very top of funnel heavy, that you pay large sums of money, and it's very, very hard to attribute that revenue, or you don't realize that revenue into a very later date. So that's why I wanted to double click, because what I was hearing from you, I could hear potential founders being like, oh, this guy's advising, I just need to be omnichannel and they're a $5 million brand. And it's like, no, just double down. And
this is a good transition into the work with Wildbird, right? Wildbird, when we first started with one, they were strictly on Shopify. Now they've added Amazon, and they're on baby.com and Target and these other channels. And you've done a really good job at helping them create these other demand capture spots. But one thing, man, I'll be honest, I was like, okay, this is a moment of truth for how I feel about Jason and his business, was when we added Amazon. And I remember going to this call, I was like, I'm curious to see how this goes. Like, hey guys, what's going to happen is Amazon's going to skyrocket. You're going to be tempted to spend money on ads on Amazon, and it's going to look like this really sexy ROAS. But I just ask you to hold there, because this meta spend is going to lead to sales on Amazon, and it's going to grow irregardless of that ad spend on Amazon. And so just so many people get hung up on this. And so you were just a breath of fresh air when we were aligned on that from the jump. And you were like, oh yeah, no, Nate, hold off on that for a couple months. Let's see how much revenue just slides over to Amazon, and we'll get a gauge of, hey, Shopify might look like it's stagnating. And so the meta spend may look like what's happening, it's plateauing. But in all reality, everything's growing when you factor in this new demand capture spot on Amazon. So, man, you were a breath of fresh air there, but it's just something that is happening with so many founders. When they add this other channel, all of a sudden they think their meta spend and Shopify is less efficient, but in all actuality, everything's growing. So you've been huge. It's been amazing to partner with you on that, to understand the incrementality of meta specifically on these other demand capture channels. And man, couldn't be more aligned. And I just thought that was a good point to add into this mix of something that, we've been partnering on with Nate and helping him grow his business on that front. And I'm curious, would you add anything to that from what you've seen with other businesses as well?
I would, yeah. I mean, look, it's disappointing that you guys are seeing a lot of founders that are kind of confused and kind of by that situation. They don't fully, understand what's going on. So they're kind of going down the wrong path. I would say that a couple things, I don't want to turn it into an Amazon podcast. I know that's not what this is, but I just have a general philosophy around Amazon in the D2C world, which is if you build your brand, Amazon is it's just a store. It's just a sales channel. It's just a place where people should be coming to buy you. They're intentionally coming there to buy your products. They just happen to buy them. They like to buy them on Amazon because prime shipping, or they got my credit card stored, or I know I can return them. But what you should do the right way, and especially in this environment, because the Amazon ecosystem is such a freak show most of the time for so many companies, is build your brand, then take it to Amazon, and then just ride people who want to come there and specifically look for your products. They just like to buy them on that channel. And that's the approach that Wildbird's taken. It's the right one, I believe. And I think what a lot of guys find is if you try to build your brand on Amazon, bad move. That's a losing game. So build your brand off and then use it purely as a sales channel.
So to be clear, if I'm hitting a 3 ROAS on Amazon's ad account and I'm hitting a 2 ROAS in Meta, Meta's probably performing better?
Yes. If you're hitting a 3 ROAS on with some rare exceptions on Amazon, 3 ROAS, it should be very disappointing to you. I think it should be as good or better than a Google brand search campaign ROAS, right? That's what it should be. Probably better, because everybody's coming to Amazon with the pure intention to buy products, and not everybody's coming to Google with the pure intention.
So that's a 15 to 20x ROAS, not 3.
And that's a good, you mentioned, one thing I'll say about Wildbird too is it's a good thing. It's a good example of this idea of, look, it's a baby brand. Moms want to shop, and moms love to shop at Target. Moms love to shop on Amazon. Moms love to shop on Babylist. Moms love to shop on the brand's website. Okay, so Wildbird, they're like, well, I should probably be in those places. And then as they've seen it, as they've done that in a very thoughtful way, it's just brought more and more expansion, all at the right, I'd say, profit level.
And you would say, just one last, might sound like a silly question. You would say Meta impacts the revenue in all those channels in some way or another?
Absolutely, yes. It does. Yeah. So if anybody's confused about that, I'm happy to. You can give them my phone number, and I'll be happy to give them a 10-minute.
You heard it here first.
A 10-minute unsolicited advice speech about how to think about that.
What is the market like for brands getting acquired right now?
Like right this second here, August 2024, I would call it choppy is the word I would use. What I would say is, if you are a top quartile type of company in your category, there's very healthy interest for someone to acquire you. Some might argue you need to be top 10 or 15%, but sort of best of the best. There's a very healthy demand for those businesses. for anything, what you see a lot of times in cycles is it's often defined by what's happening in that second quartile. So in more of a bear cycle, which we're kind of in right now for consumer M&A, as soon as you get to that second quartile, the demand drops rather precipitously. Now, in a really bull market, like we saw in like 21, there's even huge demand for the second quartile, right? Rarely is there a ton of demand once you get below second quartile. But that's so what's going on with that sort of next tier down is usually how you define, are we in a bull market or are we in a kind of more of a bear market? Or kind of, so we're in this choppy market where top quartile, plenty of demand, second quartile, not a lot of demand. So it obviously is exacerbated by the world you guys know very well. It's just people are struggling in the D2C space with customer acquisition, right? They just are. And so, having a great agency like Kinship becomes even more important in like this type of environment, right? I mean, it's one of those things where, everybody looks smart, right? When just the tide is just moving everyone looks smart. Then it's, it's like when stuff gets tough, that's when you find out who the real players are. And it is, I mean, it's, and you see, I mean, whether you're on LinkedIn or whether you're just going to conferences, you hear a lot of people like, hey man, it's tough for me to acquire at a reasonable cost right now. And that's what, from an investor acquirer standpoint, that's one of the things they're just so focused on is like, okay, going back to my point about growing like sustainably and profitably, I'd say if I'm trying to sell a D2C business right now, one of the main things a buyer is going to do is they're going to try to really drill in and say, okay, I'm like, just pick a number. I'm doing 10 million a year right now, and my CAC is $50. What's my CAC to get to 15 million? Is my CAC going to have to go to 100? Is it going to have to go like, where is it? And if A, I can't really figure it out, or B, it looks like it's going to have to go up a lot to get that next group, then they're like, nah, man, there's too much there. I'm probably not interested.
Well, there's also the business model, right? Where it's like, if your repeat rates are terrible or your first order profitable, it has to be dependent, like, and you're relying on product launches.
Yeah, very, very. In fact, that's a good point, Cody. I would sort of add to that's why what you're seeing, food and like health and beauty businesses have kind of the most demand right now because they're the highest repeat order type products, right? So, and again, great point, because if I have a huge return rate, I don't need new customer acquisition quite as much. So if that's the thing that's most murky, okay, cool. Let me look at businesses that don't need it as much to be really successful. So yeah, I'd say, but it's funny because of course I think it's been this way for a long time where, acquirers, they love a repeat order. They love a high return business. They love a consumable, but at the same time, and this is how markets work. Great. Well, a lot of people know that, including people who start businesses. So you got a lot of people who are trying to start consumable businesses. So you got a lot of competition, right? And so the forces tend to balance things out. But yeah, that I would say, because of the state of things currently, food and beverage, health and beauty have had a much better year in M&A this year than any other categories. And those one-time purchasers, it's just a lot harder for them. You have to really prove that you've got a brand that's going to like be able to drive a lot of new customers very consistently.
Another spontaneous question here. How important or not important are year-over-year comps? Or is that even a thing when they're looking to acquire a business?
It's definitely important. I would say how important depends on what's going on, like currently in the market. Because a lot of people would argue, well, again, we're August 23 right now is irrelevant to what's going on in August 24 because the market dynamics have shifted, right? So it's a little bit business dependent. It's a little bit category dependent. It's always going to play a role, year-over-year growth. I mean, it's kind of like, all right, if there's like a basic metric that any buyer is going to include on their list of fairly important figures, year-over-year growth is going to always be one of them. But the exact amount that it plays, like the weight and the role, it shifts around depending on like current market dynamics.
The impetus for the question is just I have a lot of conversations with founders, and they can't get out of their head these comps to 21, 22, and even 23. And I'm just like, man, get out of your head these comps to this irrelevant market that we were kind of in, where money was just so thrown around and growth was happening for everybody. It's not helpful versus like what it is we're trying to achieve moving forward.
Do you mean like revenue comps or more like valuation comps?
More around those, more around the year-over-year revenue, top-line revenue comps, because I would imagine that's very different a couple of years ago versus like year-over-year comps on how the trailing 12 months of profitability looks like.
I think, and I'd say the good news is we're far enough out now, like from, especially like 21, 20, yeah. People at this point, for the most part, they're like, I get on the investor side, just throw those away, like throw them away. I mean, it's, and I agree, if founders that are going to spend too much time focused on that, they're definitely wasting their time, right? It's like you're focused on the wrong thing. Look at where your business is right now, and think about your market dynamics today, maybe even, again, a lot of them last year, but much before that, 2021, 22, just it's a different world. It's kind of a one-time anomalous type of a thing that you have to put in the rearview and focus on, what matters now, what's going to work now. And I can tell you from a buyer perspective, they look at it the same way. Like they're not holding people to those comps and saying, well, you're still down versus your best COVID year. It doesn't matter.
Jason, if you can leave the audience with anything, what is your bottom line advice that you'd give?
Okay, so I'll make it relevant, right, to this podcast and to you guys. I would say
I want the irrelevant to the podcast advice too.
Okay, I'll throw a second one in then. So the relevant one is find partners, especially within the marketing function, that seamlessly, right, fit in with your business and your team, who understand and want to be part of the bigger picture, right, and want to be, a catalyst for overall success of the business, right? So I would say that's my advice. Find partners, whether it's in marketing, any of the other functions, that really understand and want to do that. They want to integrate, and they want to be part of a cohesive team and play a role on a bigger team. I think that's really important. I think that's something you guys do extremely well, and I think it's to your credit and likely to your clients, certainly benefit and success. I know with the ones we work with, it certainly has been. So I would say the non-relevant advice to the podcast would be, look, operating environment right now for D2C businesses, it's tough. So I would say to founders, just keep grinding and keep working. It's easy to look around and go, wow, somebody else must be just, it seems like everyone else is maybe doing better than me. The truth of the matter is, no, it's a hard operating environment. So if you believe in your brand and you believe in what you're doing, just keep grinding it out, and we're going to get through this period pretty soon, and it's going to get a little bit easier. So I would certainly encourage a lot of what's probably your likely listeners to just keep head down and keep ripping.
Jason, if people wanted to work with GW or reach out to you, where's the best place to do that? Yeah,
just our website, gw.partners. You can email me directly, jason@gw.partners. I always have to clarify, we're not a .com, we're a .partners. So yeah, either one's good. Always happy. Love to talk to founders. Love to talk to people that want to, are interested in what we do. As I was telling Taylor before we started here, I mean, we're a boutique, and we like to serve and have fun while we're doing it. So always happy to talk to people. Never trying to just talk to people who want to give me money.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. Really, really valuable stuff. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, Jay.
Loved it. Thanks, guys.